Alright, I wasn't able to do a stream this morning because I was asleep for most of it, but I did want to highlight an article that is kind of goofy. It's called Dropout Andrew Yang, and it's by Esther Wong. And the picture, it's at the top of the image of the article, rather, is an image of Yang upside down going into a hole. You can already tell what kind of article this will be. Let's read it. It was easy initially to dismiss Andrew Yang as a joke when he first entered the primary. The startup guy turned presidential candidate's most distinguishing qualities seemed to be his almost pathological aversion to wearing ties, and the belief that giving all Americans over the age of 18 a universal basic income, what he called his freedom dividend, would prepare us for an incoming economic collapse driven by robots and automation. Yang himself often sums up his presidential run like this. There's an Asian man running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. In recent months, Yang also became known for having a number of fans among white nationalists and the alt-right, who seemed to favorably interpret his UBI proposal as economic populism for the white working class, and also because, as one put it, generally speaking, white nationalists find Asians to be the most agreeable non-white group in our society, for his stance against circumcision, and for challenging Ted Cruz to a game of pickup basketball. All of this raises some questions, or at the very least, some eyebrows, about the sincerity of his stunt-heavy campaign. But he's built a small, if very vocal, coalition of disaffected young men and techies who were seduced by his so-called non-ideological technocratic vision, as well as the cool gleam of being given $1,000 a month. Yang started as a novelty, but now he's a novelty with some staying power, continuing to poll around 2 or 3% nationwide. Outlier, one outlier has given him an 8% at 8% nationwide, ahead of Pete Buttigieg. I said that they didn't actually write that. It's just my nickname for him. And Kamala Harris. It's hardly a sign of strength, but much like a nagging cold, he refuses to go away. Much of his appeal, as profiles and campaign reporting have made clear, comes from his apparent earnestness and directness in tackling anxiety-inducing questions about the future of work and the material conditions of people's lives, which is why it's so curious that his policy platform doesn't come anywhere close to solving the problems he says he cares about. Plus, it's hard to take a man who crowd surfs seriously. Even Beto hasn't tried that trick yet. Yet incredibly, an increasing number of news outlets are taking him very seriously. In The Atlantic, a recent piece by Peter Beinart titled Why Andrew Yang Matters described him approvingly as a modern-day Ross Perot, another outsider candidate who believes that the main ills facing America were purely about economics. This is an odd position to embrace at a time when our president has embraced full-on white supremacy, yet Yang is a true believer. How did Trump become our president in 2016? Yang asked a crowd at a rally in New York City in May. The answer is, of course, simple math. I looked at the numbers, he said, and Trump is our president for one simple reason. We automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, all of the swing states that Trump needed to win. Beinart isn't the only one who finds aspects of Yang's campaign appealing either. Whether he has a real shot at the nomination or not, Yang is onto something. CNN's S.E. Coop wrote of what she called his marketing incapacity for anger. His marketing capacity for anger. In contrast, I can only assume to candidates like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, she added without exactly explaining why, and a front runner would be smart to pay attention. But we don't actually need Ross Perot reinvented for 2019 as a tech pro. If Yang cares deeply about inequality and a future on our dying planet, the best contribution that he could make right now would be to drop out of the race and throw his support behind candidates who actually have substantive ideas on how to tackle the ways that corporate power has ruthlessly and intentionally diminished people's lives. Andrew, I beg of you, please stop wasting our time. Now, here's where I admit that my dislike of Andrew Yang isn't purely based on policy. Andrew Yang is embarrassing and irritating to me, a fellow Chinese American. The first East Asian to make a somewhat serious run for president is Andrew effing Yang, a failed lawyer turned entrepreneur who wants to make America think harder and charm white nationalists on Reddit into kind of liking him. I cringe every time he whips out his standard line. The opposite of Trump is an Asian guy who likes math. I wince every time he cracks stale jokes about being Asian, like he did during the last presidential debate in Houston. Lines that haven't been updated since 1990. I'm Asian, so I know a lot of doctors, he quipped before talking about his healthcare plan. Patsy Mink, he is not. Full disclosure, my sister used to work with Yang at Manhattan Prep, and my other sister's husband is apparently some sort of distant cousin to him. If I were Yang, this is where I joke that this is proof that all Asian people are related to one another. That's a bad, boring joke. It's actually because all Taiwanese Americans know each other. I remember the first moment that I thought Andrew Yang kind of sucks. It was his CNN town hall in April, and Yang once again shared how he was perplexed by his appeal to a number of white nationalists. Asked first by an audience member who had been present during the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville what he could do to combat white nationalism, he responded that the key to ending the tribalism that's tearing this country apart would be solved by getting the economic boot off of people's throats. In other words, by his freedom dividend. Also, notice, if you will, that the single mothers of color who disproportionately experience the economic hardship Yang describes here have actually not become Nazis in the years since the recession. Here is a man I thought who really doesn't get it. Okay, this article goes on for a couple more paragraphs, but you know, there seems to be, and I kind of want to, if anyone's seen any of the other times where I've actually gone and read some of the editorials that have been directed toward Yang, there's almost this weird. So basically, when Fox wants to disparage a person on the basis of, like they're arguing, let's say, for rights for, I don't know, blacks or some other minority, they'll get someone of the same ethnicity to get on TV and basically push back against whatever that person is saying, affects that group. So this is kind of a similar thing where you now have these Asians, and we saw this yesterday with yesterday, 2 days ago, with the article that was written from Yale. These Asians who are coming forward and trying to tell you that Yang making a couple of jokes, which he's entitled to do, and he can get away with because he's not a member of another group. That's just how a lot of this stuff works. That he supposedly, is doing something to them. That he must be held at some high, ridiculous standards for some reason. Oh my God, it's been 50 years since a major Asian candidate ran. Okay, does that mean they must all, he by definition has to never be able to have a sense of humor? And she really brought up him surfing a crowd as some kind of deterrent to his level of seriousness or quality as a candidate. It has nothing to do with anything. But listen, you can read this. You can also see where she talks about his white nationalist supporters. That's another smear. Do I look like a white nationalist to you? But this is my point, that they take small, you just need, when you want to destroy or try to distract from someone's main topics or actual issues they're focusing on, you get a couple of true points and then you just blow them up. So, for example, Yang actually does have white nationalists who have expressed support for his campaign. Here's the thing: whenever you run for president, you don't know who the hell is going to back you. I've had Trump supporters leave me positive comments. Does that mean, though, that most of the people who back me are Trump supporters? And how would I have had control over whether they liked what I had to say or not anyway? So it's guilt by association, but also by a standard to where you have no control over it. Oh my God, this one white nationalist online said they like Yang. He must be funded and supported by white nationalists. And when they talk about economic stuff having to do with racial justice, part of the reason that a lot of people go after Hispanics is there's this belief that they're stealing American jobs and taking positions that are, you know, belonging to those born here. Not saying that's true. That's just what the, the stereotype I've seen forwarded. And what he's saying is if we create more jobs and everyone or more people are employed, the chances of that I've got to blame everyone else for my hardship thing tends to go out the window because even as someone who has had periods of unemployment that, I didn't blame a particular ethnic group, but I did say to myself, if you didn't have so many people here, you probably would have an easier chance getting a position. But again, that's just a thing of when you feel there's a surplus of individuals, the amount of positions that people can take feels really small and dwindling, and then you get upset because you're going out of your way to apply here, apply there, and when Yang talks about wanting 4 million positions back in those states, a lot of people uh, in those areas Trump won felt that exact same way. And I wouldn't be so upset if they just kind of expressed how they don't like the joke thing, but they're taking it to a level. Listen, if you can watch every single interview Yang has done since being a presidential candidate this year, last year, however long you want to go back, and I guarantee you, the majority of the time that he speaks in every single interview, maybe not in the debates, but I still think in the debates, have always had him talking about policy substance. They're trying to turn these small little references to him being Asian into this big scandal controversy that is hurting so many Asians and making them feel bad about themselves. And like, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. He's not talking about them in any disparaging way. Yes, it's a stereotype, but he's acknowledging that. I mean, like, I don't understand what the. Well, I do understand they're trying to take things that aren't really that big of a deal and stretch them out to be a huge, giant, enormous thing. But see, what I always understood about people who drop out of presidential campaigns, and maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, is that usually when they get out of the race, it's because they're falling behind in the polls, their numbers are decreasing. There's not really much chance for them to go up. That's why we had Booker talking about if he couldn't raise more money, then he would get out. And because at the same time he was basically lagging in the polls, eighth, ninth, 10th place. Just really doing not very good at all. Uh, this lady is literally saying, "Hey Yang, forget that your campaign is now theoretically sixth place or going into the top five. Because Harris is just doing this over and over. Because you made some jokes I don't like. Because I think you don't have the best grasp of the racial justice thing, which, I mean, I would disagree with that, but whatever. You must get out. Please get out. I'm begging you. We know your campaign is doing the best it's done since you launched it, but because I feel so amiss about the things you have said about our ethnic group and you not getting racial stuff, then I want you out. Please oblige." The reason I read these articles also is just to kind of show you that there are a lot of dumb people who are trying to smear him these editorials, which aren't really doing much of anything, but they're a good case study because a lot of times I'll get critiqued for not having like some full, because I've said Yang is one of three candidates I support. I'll get critiqued for not being some full on support, and I said, hey, I'd rather be a person who says he's one of three people that I'd vote for there in the primary than, oh my God, he spoke disparagingly about Asians. Even though a bunch of Asians support his campaign, I speak for all of them or a majority of them when I say shame on Yang. Like, that it's unproductive, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. When I've critiqued him, it's been policy focused, uh, and even then, there's still like I don't like being lumped in the category with these people because they're not coming from a place of I would never tell someone who is in any top position unless they're having like some serious health issue like with Biden with brain rotting Biden, how we all think he's losing his mind, to get out of the race, because it literally makes no sense. That's one of the dumbest things you can do. You're running for the most powerful position on the planet, and you're in the top six for one of the two major parties, and this is when you get out. Yang would have to, if he followed the advice of this article, and we're gonna close this out by saying this. He would have, if he decided, you know what, I just read this article, she's right, I've been very offensive to my people, I'm gonna drop out. He would need to return every single degree or certification of his intellect to every place he could think of. I mean, that's how dumb that decision would be. But the people who write these are writing them for smears. They're trying to distract from the fact that his campaign is doing the best it's ever done. Um, and quite frankly, we're not going to let them. So this is another ridiculous article. It was kind of funny, I think, in some cases, and they're having no effect.